Hi everyone. After a long gap, I am starting again on a new subject of central nervous system. So today I will be giving a very brief introduction to the CNS. Now CNS is composed of two major organs. One is brain, another is spinal cord. Now these two components, these two organs of the CNS, they have almost 100 billion neurons. And neurons, as you know, they are the basic unit of the nervous system. Now, if we see CNS as such, it is the spinal cord. The spinal cord is an organ which connects the brain with the peripheral structure, whereas the brain we broadly divide into lower brain and the higher brain. The lower brain is essentially a subcortical structure responsible for involuntary functions like respiration, control of blood pressure and equilibrium. Whereas higher brain, which is a cortical structure, is responsible for memory, cognition, thought and so many other important functions. Now just to have a diagrammatic sketch, a diagrammatic representation of a structure, neuron. This neuron is composed of the dendrites, composed of cell body and a long structure known as axon. Now, one complete neuron has got dendrites with multiple branches, you can say. It has got a cell body with a nucleus, with the mitochondria, with the cytoplasm and all other cell structures. And the axon, which is a long structure. So this is responsible for transmission of impulse from one to another place. So this one neuron is connected, or it is transmitting to another neuron. And these two neurons, they have come in contact. In between, there is a gap, we call them as synapse. So what is a synapse? Synapse is the gap between two neurons. And this synapse contains neurotransmitter, which is responsible for transmission of impulses. Now, there are two types of transmission which takes place into the brain through the neuron. One is a chemical transmission. This happens through the neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are the chemical like acetylcholine, dopamine, gamma aminobutyric acid, noradrenaline, histamine, and so many others. There are about 50 or more neurotransmitters which are present into the CNS. Then another type of transmission which happens at the gap junction is an electrical transmission. Now this is happening between two adjoining neurons with the direct contact of electrical impulse. Now, if we just glance through the central neurotransmitters, there are few which are like, all these neurotransmitters are, first of all, they are very fast acting. When we say fast acting, they are like flash, like immediately they produce their effect within milliseconds. And broadly classified into excitatory neurotransmitters and inhibitory transmitters. So excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate and aspartate, they causes neuronal excitation whenever they are acting on their specific receptors. Similarly, gamma aminobutyric acid and glycine, they are two major inhibitory neurotransmitters which causes inhibitory function in the brain. As we have seen, the other neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, noradrenaline, epinephrine, histamine, 5-HT and dopamine. All these are very important and we will discuss all these neurotransmitters in context with the diseases and the drugs which we'll be talking in subsequent sessions. Now coming to the receptors. In our CNS, in our earlier sessions, we have seen the receptors. What are they? They are basically the protein which are essentially responsible for binding with a specific neurotransmitter. Now here we are just looking into the few of them, like glutamate. As we have seen, it is one of the excitatory neurotransmitter. So there are three types of neurotransmitter, three types of receptors, in the glutamate. One is called NMDA, the other is AMPA, and the third one is called canates. Now these three types of receptors, they have their different functions, but primarily NMDA, which has got aspartate as an agonist, has got two antagonists, which are ketamine and phencyclidine. These are used in different medical conditions, which we will see later. AMPA is primarily being explored in the pathogenesis and the treatment of stroke. Canate is again under investigation so far as the therapy is concerned. Now, if we see other neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, if we see acetylcholine in the CNS, it is primarily involved in the Alzheimer's disease. You can say the deficiency of cholinergic function leads to the problem of Alzheimer's, and it is treated by various cholinomimetic drugs. We will discuss this in subsequent presentations. Similarly, dopamine. There are two major diseases of the CNS. One is schizophrenia, which is a psychiatric illness, and Parkinson's disease, which is a neurodegenerative disorder. In these two conditions, dopamine is a major neurotransmitter which is involved, and that we will take up later. Histamine is one of the neurotransmitters which has been found to be useful, or which is found to be involved in various behavioral disorders in conditions like narcolepsy, that is excessive sleep, Alzheimer's disease, histamine in conditions of ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and sleep-wake cycle. 5-HT or serotonin involved in mood, depression, anxiety, phobia, and hallucination. So we see that for various functions or specific functions of the brain, there are different neurotransmitters which are involved, and so the drugs which are acting in the CNS, they do have modification in their neurotransmitter level. Then another chemical which is there in the brain is called neuropeptide, because they are the chemicals which are peptide in nature, and they are modifying the function of neurons. They are synthesized in the cell body, unlike the neurotransmitters which are synthesized into the neuron itself, or into the presynaptic neurons, you can say. And unlike the neurotransmitter, they have got a slow action. Not like that, they have a very flash-like effect within milliseconds. They take few seconds or few minutes even to have their own effect. Some of the neuropeptides are like TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, luteinizing hormone releasing hormone, that is LHRH, endorphins, oxytocin, vasopressin, calcitonin, neuropeptide Y, and neurokinins. Now some of these, just for the purpose of introduction, I am mentioning, but the discussions will happen in the subsequent presentations. Then there is another type of chemical called neurolipids. They are relatively a recent discovery in the sense of knowing their effect into the various neurological functions. They are endogenous cannabinoids which are having two different receptors. One is called CB1, another is called CB2. Now, endogenous cannabinoid system is present, having again two you can say chemicals or legions which are there. One is anandamide, another is called virudamine, and there are two major, but there are multiple cannabinoids which are present in the brain for causing multiple physiological response and also involved in various disease process. Like they are in the pain sensation, they are responsible for stress response, they are even for anxiety, for appetite, for motor learning, for epilepsy, glaucoma, and also they have got antiemetic effect. Now some of these cannabinoids are now being used for increasing the appetite in certain conditions like HIV. They are used now in certain refractory epilepsies which are very difficult to treat, and they're also used as a very potent antiemetic drugs, primarily for the patient who are got vomiting in the cancer chemotherapy. Then another group of chemicals are called neurotrophins, which are primarily for nourishment of the nervous system. NGF, which is nerve growth factor, primarily responsible for maintaining the function of neurons. And then there is another one called BDNF, which is responsible for neuroplasticity and cognition in the brain. Cytokines is very familiar to most of us now, primarily because they are the ones which are involved in various diseases other than nervous system also, like interleukin 1, interleukin 6, TNF alpha, or interferon gamma. And these new cytokines are also present into the CNS, which are responsible for like neuronal growth. They are responsible for neurogenesis. They are responsible for synaptic pruning during the brain development. As we all know that the synaptic development is not just haywire, it is going under a very controlled situation. And this pruning of synaptic structure is under the effect of various cytokines. Synaptic transmission, plasticity, immune reaction, inflammation, and infection. So cytokines has got again an important role into the brain functions and brain disorders. Then after these neuronal structure, we have various non-neuronal cells which are present into the brain for the support action, or we call them as support cells or neuroglia. Now these neuroglia are two major types. One is called microglia, which are responsible for immune function, causing, you can say, macrophages. They are like macrophages which are responsible for killing the foreign substances coming into the body, into the brain. They are microglia. Then there are macroglia. These macroglia are basically multiple cells which are having various functions. Like we have astrocytes, we have oligodendroglia, we have ependymal cells. Astrocytes are for metabolism of neurons, oligodendroglia are for myelin formation, and ependymal cells are for CSF production. So if you see, these support cells are very important for maintaining the brain function as well as their structure in terms of fighting from the foreign infection or inflammation, also responsible for immune reaction, also responsible for CSF production, which are important fluids in the brain, and also the metabolism. Now, when we talk about the CNS drugs, there are two major categories of the CNS drug. One which modifies the normal CNS. Like we have various drugs which has got bad effects and not so good effect in the brain. We call them causing sedation, drowsiness, and so on and so forth. And similarly, there are another kind of drug which is primarily correcting the abnormal CNS, like any psychiatric disorder or any neurodegenerative condition. So when we will come into the subsequent slides, we'll talk about these drugs will come, and when we are talking in the context of the diseases like Parkinson, Alzheimer's, we will know more about these CNS drugs. So this is a big brief of the brain, our central nervous system, and we will have the next presentation, our next is related to CNS. Thank you.